Good afternoon, my name's Jaya Calder from Highlands and Isles Enterprise, and welcome to our latest in our series of joint Scottish Offshore Wind Cluster webinars. This afternoon we're going to be looking at a virtual project update on Seagreen. Now, some of you will have already joined some of our previous cluster webinars, so you know how we run them. But if this is your first time coming in using GoTo, I'll just take a quick minute to explain how it works. Although as an audience, you're automatically muted, we actively encourage you to get involved and submit your questions via the question box at any point throughout the webinar. Also, it's just the speakers' webcams that you'll see. We're always looking to promote knowledge sharing and collaboration, so we're recording this session and we'll send a copy of the presentation and the webinar recording to everyone who is registered for the webinar. So that's all from me. So over to my colleague Lindsay for a quick intro and to introduce today's speakers. Lindsay.
Thank you very much. Yes, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to this session for the Seagreen project update. We have an incredibly busy agenda today, so I am joined by my colleagues Andrew Jameson, Chief Executive of the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. He'll be talking about the innovation lead for SOEC and what they're up to just now. We've got Andy MacDonald, Programme Director of the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership, and he'll be talking about supply chain support with lots of exciting activity happening now. And finally, we have John Casserly from SSE Renewables. John's the Head of Procurement and Commercial Services, so this is a really great opportunity to hear about the projects that are being undertaken now and in the future. My colleague Gillian Morrison from Highlands and Islands Enterprise is representing DeepWind today. Gillian will be facilitating the Q&A. So in your chat comments, please do put any questions in as and when you think them up, and we'll revisit those for the Q&A. Any questions that we don't get through today, we will provide the contact details for each of our presenters so that you can get in touch directly if there is a burning question there. If you'd like to find out about news, events, what's happening with the clusters, I'm representing on Firth and Tay Offshore. Gillian's here for DeepWind today. Please do visit our website. So it's offshorewindscotland.org.uk for DeepWind and forthandtayoffshore.co.uk for Forth and Tay. You can join both memberships, one or the other, whatever works for your business, but we're here to support all supply chain companies in Scotland. Our next event is the 15th of October, and it will focus on diversity and inclusion for competitive skills in the supply chain. And that session will feature EDF Energy and Ørsted. So please do join. At the end of today, we will have a feedback and survey when you exit the webinar. I'd encourage you to think about what content your business wants to find out more about and where you need support. We're working really hard in the background to make sure that we're connecting the right information and knowledge sharing with the business needs that you have. I'm delighted to start and open this session today, so I will invite all our guests to pop off their cameras just now, and I will hand over to Andrew Jameson. Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you very much indeed, and thank you to colleagues for inviting me to come and speak to you all today. Looks like we've got a great attendance, which is tremendous to see. So I'm Andrew Jameson, I'm the Chief Executive of the Offshore Renewable Catapult, and I'm sitting in front of you today with my hat on as a representative of SOEC. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the background to why we all came together, what we're collectively looking to do. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about innovation and what that should mean for all of our benefits in terms of supply chain growth. And as Lindsay's just mentioned, I'm very happy to engage with you and take any questions that you may have towards the end. So the background, you may know this, but for those of you who don't, last year, the Offshore Wind Industry Council and the UK government struck the sector deal, which committed to a target of 30 gigawatts in UK waters by 2030, as you can see in the slide there. And within that came a whole range of initiatives across supply chain skills, innovation, etc. I think the big thing out of the sector deal is collective discussion at the right levels across industry and with key stakeholders in government. Is creating that conversation about there's the goal, there's the common ambition about what we all want. It's not just capacity of projects in the water, it's the economic benefit that should also come through from supply chain growth, very strong supply chain growth in the UK. Just when we signed that deal at 30 gigawatts, the government started to talk about even higher ambitions, and it's now been raised to a target of 40 gigawatts. And around the same time, the Climate Change Committee came out with their report on net zero, and it said the UK will need by 2050 around 75 gigawatts, if not more, of offshore wind. And the more bit is relating to things like renewable heat and renewable transport, and what role offshore wind might have in helping to derive those fuels. So as I say, I think the sector deal has been a great thing. I know you might not all feel it very directly, but it's creating avenues for very strong conversation to look at the very solid barriers that we quite often have in the UK on economic progress. I'm delighted my colleague Andy MacDonald from the Catapult is going to talk to you about one of the key initiatives, which is the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership shortly. SOWEC, the Scottish Offshore Wind Industry Council, which I'm also a member of, was formed so as we can address any translational aspects of the sector deal for Scotland, because obviously we've got we've got unique aspects in terms of water depth, distance from shore, transmission charging, and so on. We just wanted to make sure that Scotland was organising itself collectively enough to do the translation of what the UK-wide sector deal was going to mean. So that's why SOWEC was formed. And on the next slide, we'll show you the members of SOWEC are as follows. So it's delighted to have Mr. Paul Wheelhouse, the Energy Minister, Scottish Energy Minister, co-chair it with Brian McFarlane, one of the senior managers from SSE. And then across the various work streams, we've got the development community there, we've got innovation, barriers to growth, the skills agenda, and very importantly, supply chain and cluster agenda. And we're also joined by various representatives from around the enterprise agencies. Look at the box at the bottom of the page there. There's a huge focus on what are we doing about all of the above to enable economic growth, principally through the clusters that have been created with DeepWind and Forth and Tay. I am delighted to see those clusters really self-form and really look at more deeply what economic advantage we can bring to the market, because we all know, and I mentioned in my previous slide, the size of the prize is enormous in terms of offshore wind growth in the next few years. Let me tell you a little bit about innovation. First question is, what on earth is it? Because it means different things to different people. And let me dissuade you of the notion that it's some sort of wacky thing about invention. Occasionally it will be invention, but more often than not, I look at innovation about doing things that we already do, but doing them better. So as we go from one project to the next, how do we take the knowledge of what was learned in the previous way of doing things and do it better in future things? That sometimes quite often means technology improvements. It quite often means process improvements. And an awful lot, as I mentioned, is about learning, and especially de-risking. The de-risking point is very important because risk generally means high price, because the risk has to be covered in a commercial way. So what we look to do in our cross innovation is connect learning and knowledge across different sectors and within our own sector, so as we can learn and move forwards. And as I say, it can be about invention, but more often than not, it's about doing what we know today, but doing it better, more efficiently, more cost effectively, and those kinds of things. So just to reassure you, you should all be connecting in some way with some sort of innovation play in your business. You can all do it. A little bit, if I may, just on what is the Catapult about. So we are the UK's leading innovation centre in offshore renewable energy. That means offshore wind primarily, but also little bits of marine as well, so wave and tidal. As you can see on the map there, we have offices and officers right around the UK, which I'm very pleased about. So although I'm based in Glasgow, and our prime assets for test and validation, which I'll show you in a second, are in Blyth in the northeast of England, we do have connections right across the length and breadth of the UK. We're now some 200 people strong, and we do all the things that we talked about in the previous slide, bringing the sector knowledge together, learning from previous ways of doing things, and we do that through joint projects. Quite often we'll go and seek grant funding, so as again we can help with the de-risking of the costs and the way forwards. And of course we also do it through bilateral arrangements where we're helping customers out very directly. You can see that, oh sorry, you might spot at the very bottom the Chinese flag there. We have a presence in China where we're helping UK businesses go out to feed into that market, which is a very fast growing market. So overall, lots going on in innovation, but we're very focused on it's about supply chain and economic growth and benefits here in the UK. Very quickly on the next slide, there's some lovely pictures there showing you the kinds of activities that we do. So in Blythe, we have some of the biggest, if not the biggest, assets in the world for testing componentry in offshore wind turbines. So we can test blades up to 100 meters long. In fact, we've tested longer blades, but we've got the tip off. We can test drivetrains up to 15 megawatts. We've got smaller laboratories that will do 3-5 megawatt testing and so on. And as you can see, we've also got a high voltage laboratory where we can do things, and we do these things like cable proving and so on. The turbine you see at the bottom is the one that we've got, the old Samsung turbine, which is in Methil in Fife. There we enable lots of SMEs to come together to prove their product as they go on a commercialisation journey towards the market, because quite often wind farms are fully commercially run and there's no way of interrupting them or breaking the warranties and so on. So I think it's a tremendous vehicle that we have to do real-time research and do it in real life with real live businesses across the SME landscape and indeed the academic landscape likewise. One more slide on what the catapult about. This is a breakdown, at least it was as of January about this year, of the spectrum of SMEs that we serve. I think it's very interesting because it's starting to show what's emerging as real tour de forces within the UK about what kinds of new industries are coming to the fore. And that's giving us more gravitas to talk to governments north and south and very locally about what's emerging as new sector forces that we should be encouraging and nurturing. It's quite difficult to do that when you're dealing with lots and lots and lots of small individual companies, but when you add them up together, you can say, hey, we've got new products and services coming in this space, and they can not only serve our industry, they should also be serving the marine industries as a whole, so the oil and gas sector and so on. You can see there the spectrum there of what's emerging. I'll take you to the bottom right of this chart. I'd like to see more happening in the less sexy bits, which are the stuff that sits in the water, usually the foundations and the installation methodologies and so on. I think there's a lot more room for improvement and growth in the UK economic landscape around that. So again, I encourage you all to have a think about, you can fit into these landscapes. You're not going to be a lone voice because there's strength in numbers coming together. And this is a slide that's got a very powerful message when we talk to the innovation stakeholders around Innovate UK, the enterprise agencies, and central and regional governments likewise. So just going back to SOWEC and the innovation priorities that we've identified for the SOWEC group. Bear in mind what I said before, this is about supply chain growth ultimately, as well as enabling the rollout and development of more projects in Scotland. But there are three main work streams that we're looking at here. One is supply chain growth and looking at step changes about how we could do things differently, as I mentioned, in process improvement. So my key question for everybody is how to improve investor confidence at the financing scale, at the financing end of the spectrum. Supply chain wants to grow, got to persuade the banks to lend them the cash or the shareholders to lend them the cash. How can we improve the levels of confidence and knowledge that are coming right across that development spectrum down the pipeline in ways that are much improved from what we do today? Because when we look at the net zero challenges and the rate of growth we've got to go to from 10 gigawatts to 75 gigawatts, we've got to go faster and we've got to do it with more confidence. So those are the kinds of things that we're exploring. I also mentioned cross-sector knowledge and learning experiences. So we're working very closely with the oil and gas sector. So between SOWEC and the oil and gas leadership group that sit underneath Scottish Government, are lots of knowledge exchanges about what's going on for the oil and gas sector. As many of you will know, they have a big decarbonisation challenge. So whilst they continue to operate, how can they do it with putting less CO2 out in the future? Also, what does it mean for our sector in offshore wind? So for some of the more remote wells, for example, and certainly end-of-life wells, they need clean power to take the last of the gas and the juice out of those wells. Is wind power an answer for them, possibly floating wind? And of course, there's endless amounts of knowledge and skills in oil and gas that could come to our sector more readily, and vice versa. So we're really looking at how do you get the two sectors to come together, again, increasing the strength of what we know and what we're able to do together. And the final work stream I find extremely interesting. This is, again, looking at net zero. Net zero simply means for the capacity that's going to be required of offshore wind, we're going to have to go further from shore. We're going to have to go to deeper water. It implies that we need a floating wind solution for all of that. Floating wind is not competitive at the moment, but it's got all the sites and prospects, same way as we did for fixed bottom wind. If we line all our ducks up in a row, if we get the scale of manufacturing going, if we get the scale of deployment going, if we get the investor confidence to be right sitting behind it, we can make real progress in floating wind. And of course, I'm looking very keenly at what does that mean for Scotland, for manufacturing, particularly for the substructures and the various componentry and secondary steelworks and various things that go into all of that, all of the above, as well as, I might add, very strongly, how do you operate those things and how would you serve floating wind farms in the future? So again, there's scope for many, many players to get into. It's not simply about their construction overall. So I'm very pleased with some of the key actions that we've got going on there, and not least of which is this catapult has created a floating wind centre of excellence. We've already got industry participants sitting around the table and looking very hard at the subjects that I've just talked to you about. So this has been a very brief and fast overview of the things that we're doing, but in conclusion, I just want to say the sector deal, I think, is a tremendous tool for us to be looking at how we get the best of conversations and true honest conversations with stakeholders in government and elsewhere. Here's what we're all trying to achieve. Here are the barriers in the way. How can we collectively not just chuck the problem at government? How can we work together on bringing the solutions? I find that a new way forwards that we didn't have before, and I really want to see that continue to go on. Scotland's prospects, as we all know, in offshore wind are massive, but it does need that level of coordination. So I'm hoping SOEC is providing that. As I say, the size of the prize is enormous. We've got some tremendous initiatives underway. You're going to hear from Andy very shortly on all of that. And I will just challenge you, we need more innovation. So think of it as something to improve your business's prospects, rather than something that you feel is a bit risky and isn't going to add value to it. I think it's about reappraising how we do stuff, whether it's a process or a policy or a manufacturing of a new product. It's all good stuff, and it all means, frankly, very strong, deep-seated economic activity in the UK and in Scotland. That's what my business is committed to trying to deliver, and I'm delighted to engage with you more and talk about what else we could all do together. So I appreciate that's been very, very quick, but happy to engage with you towards the end of the session. Lindsay, back to yourself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, what a fast 10 minutes that was. An incredible amount of information in there, but all very, very useful. Thank you. Next up, we've got Andy McDonald from the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership. So Andy, please come on line. Thanks.
Hi, thanks, Lindsay, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. All the slides will be available afterwards, so you don't all need to be taking notes, and any information we put out is available. So I'm Andy McDonald. I'm here as the Programme Director for the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership. I won't take too long because I want to get on to hearing what SSE about their project. But the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership we're here to help. Ultimately, that's the first thing to take away from this. We're here to help supply chain companies to grow, improve, and win more contracts. And you know, we're one mechanism that can help you. But I would give a big shout out to the clusters and to the development agencies, SE and HIE, who can also support. We work closely with them. If we can't help, we'll find someone that can, as much as we possibly can. So the Growth Partnership, just a little bit of history, came out of the sector deal that Andrew talked about. So about 18 months ago, the sector deal was agreed. As part of that, industry made some commitments to government. The government committed pipeline, industry committed some targets in terms of growth. So 60% of UK content in terms of exports, 2.7 billion per year, UK exports by 2030 and 27,000 jobs. So some big commitments there. And the question was always, how can we help to make sure that those commitments are met? So the Growth Partnership is all about helping to deliver those commitments. So it's funded by the members of the Offshore Wind Industry Council, so the developers and the turbine OEMs. It's delivered by Catapult. but the mechanism for delivering it is through an organisation called Offshore Wind Growth Partnership. So that's the kind of structure of it. Its aims are very much to deliver on the sector deal, so increase content, increase exports, and to grow companies. And we have about £100 million budget over the 10-year period up to 2030 to make that happen. Now, I'd just like to talk about the mechanisms for doing that. There's two key ways that we deliver support. One is through grant funding, so we can provide cash to companies to help them run projects in order to improve what they're doing and increase their chances of winning further contracts. The other way, and possibly the preferable way, is to help them with external expertise to bring in new ideas, new innovations, new ways of doing things, and to help them grow as a company. And we do both of those things. So business transformation is about expertise, grant funding is about providing money in for companies to run themselves. And we'll do a blend of that, roughly about 50-50 at the moment. This year we have a delivery plan budget of £4 million, split roughly between business transformation and grant funding. I'd like to talk a bit more about those two in a bit more detail. So on the business transformation side, there's obviously a range of different sizes of companies and different needs from companies, and we're trying as much as possible to address what we're doing to the needs of the companies within the sector. So at the top end, at the larger companies, we're working with the Sharing and Growth programme, which has been very successful in the aerospace sector. And Sharing and Growth is very much a high intensity programme, embedding staff into a company, working with the senior management team to help them to improve from leadership through operations, through to improve their performance. Typically, we're looking at companies with a turnover over £5 million. So it's those larger size of companies. And that programme is open for expression of interests. I'll show you the website address where you can express. There's a webinar tomorrow, and there's links to that on the website. So at 2 o'clock tomorrow, we're having a webinar specifically dedicated to the Sharing and Growth programme. At the smaller end, we have the Wind Expert Support Toolkit, which provides somewhere between 2 and 10 days of specialist support to companies. So, for example, helping companies to understand market intelligence, to understand export potential, and help them with their business planning. So those kinds of consultancy type activities, fairly short, sharp, but really giving companies a leg up to get them going. So we've got a range of programs that support to help companies get better by providing expertise into them. If I can talk briefly about the grant side of things, we have run a number of pilot projects. There were 7 companies successful last year, and those projects are ongoing. And we've followed that up with a number of calls this year, an open call and a cross-sector call. So those calls have been running. I believe the cross-sector call then closes this Friday, so I think that closes tomorrow. So we're probably a bit late on that, but we are hoping to run some larger funding calls towards the end of this year, which will scale up to sizes of between 100k and 500k of grants available for companies. In parallel with that, I've mentioned the Wind Expert Support Programme and the Sharing and Growth Programme. So that's currently what we're doing. If you think about what we're doing in terms of grant funding and business transformation. So in summary, we're here to help. If you want more information, do go to our website, which is owgp.org.uk. If you click on the I'm interested button, you can register for updates and to be on our mailing list and to provide further information. If you click on the opportunities tab, it is a breakdown of the currently active grants and the currently active business transformation program. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour, I guess, of what we've got to offer. But in summary, we're here to help. Do give us a call. Let us know if you've got any questions. Happy to get questions at the end. But I'll leave it there just now so that we can hear about the SSE projects. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Andy. Lots of great support available there, and certainly signposting if there's a different opportunity that's a best fit for your company. I see that there's lots of great questions coming in on the chat, so please do keep those up. And we've got 204 delegates in, so we're absolutely delighted to have you all in this community today to hear about the Seagreen update. So John, I invite you to hop on your webcam, and over to you.
Hi, thanks very much, Lindsay, and thank you everybody for providing us the opportunity to give people an update on where we are in Seagreen and a kind of overview and what we look for going forward in future projects. My name is John Castley. I'm the head of major projects within the renewables business in SSE, and that covers the offshore and onshore wind projects. So a bit about SSE. Hopefully everybody's aware of who SSE are, otherwise we're not doing a great job, but hopefully everybody's aware. We're a homegrown Scottish company with our headquarters in Perth. We have aims and targets to treble our renewable energy output to 30 terawatt hours by 2030. This all fits into the kind of goals, as Andy was talking about the UK goals for the 40 gigawatts by 2030 and 75 gigawatts by 2050. This all feeds into the same element. We work very hard and have worked hard over the last decade on the Scottish supply chain, and we like to create local content and local jobs. We recognise that in the communities that we work, we require those communities to help support and maintain our assets all over the UK, and not just the renewables, but also our more traditional assets where we have gas stations and other forms of power. We do encourage local supply chains because it works in the benefit for our business and local suppliers. SSE has committed to invest £7 billion in major low carbon construction projects to support the net zero carbon and spur the green economy. This is the equivalent, to put that into kind of context, people get carried away with the numbers, it's the equivalent of circa £4 million of investment every day for the next 5 years. That's SSE's element, and that's just on the bits where we are joint venture partners and other things. That's not the total investment of all our projects. That's just what SSE is putting in, including into our share in joint ventures. As well as that, SSE currently contributes approximately £1.5 billion each year into the Scottish economy, and we take our role in society and the communities really seriously, including the fair tax charter that we have, a real living wage employer, and we have community funding and other things. And I think that the other thing from an SSE perspective is that we do have the largest offshore development pipeline in the UK and Ireland, which we're very proud of. We have plans to participate in the next Crown Estate ScotWind leasing round. And today, I'm really fortunate in our businesses that we have a portfolio that's in excess of circa £25 billion worth of developments. That's just SSE, and that's just our element. You can imagine the kind of size of prize that's there for small and medium-sized enterprises across the whole of the industry. So the renewables business and the SSE, we have, and this is just a very quick slide that shows you kind of the locations of our existing wind farm developments. We have Dogger Bank, 3 1.2 gigawatt contracts totaling 3.6 gig, which we were successful in the CFD auction, and also Seagreen, which we'll go on to a little bit later on, where we secured 454 megawatts out of the 1,075 in the phase 1 project. And we managed to get Seagreen through a final investment decision and everything all tied up, and we're really pleased in June this year with a final investment decision, and that's in the middle of a COVID event, and you understand all the bits. It's quite an achievement, we think, to have got a £3 billion project with funding and everything else finalised into construction and going through that process. If we move on to the next slide, if that's okay. Thank you very much. So the Seagreen zone, again, some of you might be aware of this. So it's a joint venture with Total. SSE are taking the lead on the construction. It's off the coast of Carnoustie and Dundee. The Seagreen zone is quite a big zone. Seagreen 1, as we call it, is a combination of Alpha and Bravo. That was the original names. It's 1,075 megawatt development. We will be installing 114 turbines, providing low carbon renewable energy for around 1.3 million homes, and it will avoid around 1.6 million tonnes of CO2 emissions per year. Now, Seagreen, we expect to contribute approximately £2 billion to the UK economy, of which £1 billion could be in Scotland, and that's both construction and operation. And to kind of put that into context, Beatrice, the other offshore wind farm which we completed a number of years ago, there's an independent socio-economic impact study undertaken by Bigger Economics, which confirmed the transformational benefits to the UK and Scotland from that project, and that it's worth approximately £600 million during construction and over £1 billion during the operational life, just in Scotland alone. So that's a £1.6 billion off the back of Seagreen, Beatrice. And what we need to get people to kind of understand, and I think Andy, from the slides he was showing from the kind of ore catapult and the SOEC analysis, is that people focus quite a lot on just the construction, which is a 2 or 3 year period. Actually, there's a 25-year period of operating and maintenance where we spend just as much money in that period as we do in the first 2 or 3 years building an asset. And people get fixated on building it and providing and being involved in that kind of fabrication and supply chain, and that is really important. But also the actual operation and maintenance, there are huge opportunities there, and it is over a longer 25-year period. I think if we move on to the next slide, if that's okay. So in a kind of Seagreen context, if that's all right, this slide is tried to capture quite a lot in one slide, so I apologise. It's difficult to try and get lots of information and kind of present in a way that people understand or make sense. So the slide basically goes from the kind of layout of an offshore wind farm through the process. So from the onshore substation all the way through the onshore export cables, offshore export cables to the top side, which is out in the sea, with the foundations that the turbines sit on, and then actually the operation and maintenance. And we have put forward and we've finalised our Tier 1 contracts, as they're all named there. It also shows you the scope of their work. So we have gone for kind of traditional EPC Tier 1 contracts, Petrofac carrying out the onshore substation and offshore substation works, forgive me, and Nexans carrying out the onshore and offshore export cables. And we have Subsea 7 doing the foundations and inter-array cables, Mitsubishi Vestas providing the turbines, and we've got a combination of Mitsubishi Vestas and SSE operations undertaking the operation and maintenance element of the works over the 30-year period, which is being run out of the Montrose port. And a kind of current update on each of those packages, if that's all right. Fabrication is underway on a number of the packages, not all fabrication, but the majority. The Petrofac are currently on site and construction underway on the onshore substation. That's at Teeling. Currently, we have approximately 150 construction workers engaged at Teeling on the substation works, and also with Nexans doing the export cable works and getting the preparation ready for the landfall and also laying the cables. The majority of those operatives and people that are employed at those locations all come from the Dundee and Angus area. Petrofac will commence on site with the offshore platform around about Q2 2021. Subsea 7 on the foundations and inter-array cables. Ramboll have undertaken and completed the designs. The works are into fabrication in some elements. All the fabrication hasn't been finalised or awarded yet, but some of it's underway. And we have a programme commencement actually on site beginning to install foundations, jackets, Q1 to Q2 2021. And MW have already commenced their procurement and fabrication activities for their towers, their turbines, etc. And they have a forecast commencement on-site date of Q3 2021 with Montrose Port and the harbour facility for the operation and maintenance base. There's a really good piece of work that's been done with the kind of final layouts and the upgrades and investment that's being put into Montrose Port is already underway. Montrose Port is a really good example for us of working closely together with the supply chain. We have a really close and continuing working relationship with them, which has included engaging with stakeholders, the public, stakeholders in the harbour and the local community about the development of Montrose. We've taken on board, in conjunction with Montrose Port Authority, the feedback about the proposed investments and developments at Montrose, including the location of the pontoons for the CTVs and the operational building. We think that's been a great success because we've been able to accommodate and take account of the stakeholders' comments, and as well as people and businesses from the oil and gas sector. We have a big view that says within these areas there's a huge opportunity for businesses, particularly in Scotland, to transition from traditional oil and gas into renewables, and because they have all the skill sets and all the elements there. And with Montrose Port, we have the existing facility in the operational building. We're looking at the elements. We're already in a process with them and hope to announce or make some announcements shortly about transitioning not just people and businesses, but also assets that were traditionally oil and gas and repurposing them into renewables. I think just one last thing on the Montrose Port, if that's all right, and port facilities. There's a really interesting study that's been done independently that says for the investment and spend that you put into ports, harbours and kind of infrastructure, that they have the potential to generate 7 to 10 times the impact in the local economy, with local businesses providing goods and services. Hopefully that will be the case at Montrose and everywhere else where we work, and that's our kind of aim and goal. This slide is more of a kind of supply chain opportunities. So as I say, we have placed our main contracts in the tier ones for the EPCs. We have had meet the buyer events with those tier one suppliers, and hopefully a number of people on this call were able to attend those and register with the suppliers. We still have a significant number of opportunities in the supply chain, both in the construction but during the operation element. They're listed there. That's just an example. It's not exhaustive, but it's to get people into a mindset that says there are huge opportunities and lots of different things that we need. And it's not just about big shiny turbines. There's also haulage, there's material suppliers, there's plant hire, there's fuel supply, there's building maintenance, there's porta cabins, there's PPE, there's tools. There's lots of things which we as SSE, as an operator and owner of assets, require for the operation and maintenance element. But the support services at Montrose Harbour, our suppliers like MW will require those during the construction and the operation and maintenance phase. And also during the construction itself, there's a vast element of tier 2, tier 3 supply chain opportunities, and we would encourage our suppliers and people, small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly in Scotland, to make sure that they have the opportunity to access those supply chain opportunities and make the most of them. I think if we remain moving on to the next slide, if that's okay. So the key thing then is, and things that we get asked all the time, so hopefully this is helpful, is how do companies position themselves for success in this kind of renewables market for SSE, but also our kind of view on how this helps position you for all developers and all OEMs and suppliers, because it's not just an SSE thing. Selfishly, we'd like everybody to work for us, but we also need a supply chain that fits and is there for all of the developers and all of the operating and maintenance, because then that gives long-term security for jobs, financing, and certainty for people to invest and take a view on. So what can you do to understand the challenges and positions that we face and developers face across the offshore wind market? Well, the key things from an SSE perspective, and I'm sure it is for other developers, is registration as a potential supplier. In SSE, we have registration both within SSE and within the tier 1 suppliers. So we would ask everybody, and this is the kind of key thing, is if we don't know who you are and we don't know the goods and services we provide, and you don't know what you're capable of doing, then we'll never be able to come to you with opportunities, and we'll never know that you exist to then kind of come to you and say, look, here are opportunities. These are elements to invite you or make you aware of things as and when they become available. So it's really critical that people register both with SSE and on the SSE system, and there are details on how to do that at the end of the slides, and with our supply chain partners and our tier 1 delivery partners, because again, unless we understand who you are and what you do, it makes it really difficult for us. The key things we look for when people register is compliance with minimum requirements, health and safety and quality being the top priority for SSE and our joint venture partners, and also compliance to category specific requirements. So things like if you provide labour, that they actually have the offshore training and they're trained up to then work in that environment and have that ability. And again, traditionally, people that work in the oil and gas sector, that's a really good fit and it's an easy transition. But we would encourage others. But again, in this part of the world, in Scotland, oil and gas and round about Dundee, Angus, Aberdeen, there are loads of opportunities for people traditionally involved in oil and gas to be involved in the offshore market. We need access and to promote your capabilities. So we need to assess what you're going to do. You need to give us a clear description of what you offer and the capability that you can provide. And if you have a proven track record, if any, including in other sectors such as the oil and gas, that helps, because as Andrew said, quite a lot of what we do, the size of these things is huge. Having certainty or a level of confidence in suppliers and other things is a huge benefit to us. So therefore, having a track record and a proven track record helps, but it's not the be all and end all. And we would also encourage all SMEs or all suppliers to utilise the support that's already available, including Catapult have a Fit for Offshore programme and offshore renewables, which is a really good thing where they come in and help companies that say, well, how are you actually placed just now? What do you do? What's your skill set and capability? How can we then make you better positioned to be successful in the offshore renewables business and that market? And we would encourage everybody to take the benefits of that and get involved in it. And as the other Andrew, so forgive me, was going through in the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership, we would encourage people to get involved in that, take advantage of the things that are there that are trying to help promote you and the services that you provide into our industry. And the last thing is to be competitive. Attractive pricing from a total cost perspective and available capacity is really important. And when we talk about attractive pricing from a total cost, it isn't necessarily the cheapest price. It's about overall taking on board the risk, the contingency, the whole life cost of what you provide and the quality. What does that look like? And that's how we make our decisions. It's not who just gives us the cheapest price and we just run with them. I think the other thing here is that from an SSE perspective, success. So what does success look like, having been through all of that? Well, success for us looks like a local supply chain which is competitive. It's adaptable because O&M changes. So if you look at it, we want an adaptable supply chain. From an O&M perspective, it changes, and there will be changes in how we operate and maintain assets today as how we do it in 10 years' time. And a really good example of that is the technology has moved dramatically. So wind turbines have gone from 3 megawatt to 6 megawatt to 8 megawatts to 10. Now we're at 12 plus, and that's in a very short period of time. And drones, for instance, so you talk about innovation and changing things. Well, drones are a really good example. We now do drone inspections of blades while the wind farms are still operational, and preventative maintenance and predictive maintenance. So these drones go out, it reduces the safety, it increases efficiency because you don't have to turn them down. Historically, you would stop all the blades. You would then have people and riggers and abseiling down blades to inspect them. We can do it when they're actually functioning. That's innovation. That's bringing things that we already do into the element. The other things that are a key success for us is maximising the capacity of the supply chain to deliver new wind farms. But just as importantly, and I cannot stress this enough, is the importance of supporting the operation and maintenance of wind farms throughout their operational life, not just for SSE, but for other developers. As I said earlier, these operational wind farms have a 25 to 30 year period. We and our competitors will spend roughly the same amount of money operating and maintaining it as we do actually building it in the first place. Now, these successes and these success factors will also result in transitioning suppliers from industries such as oil and gas into the renewables, securing long-term quality employment for people that have the competence, capability and skill sets. And the other thing that will be a success for us is innovation. And as Andrew pointed out, innovation isn't about new shiny products and coming up with the latest thing. Yes, that's required, and yes, it's needed. But innovation is actually about safety, improving safety, increasing efficiency, reducing costs. Again, the drone example is a good example. It reduces risk because you don't have as many people going out and having to abseil down blades. It reduces or increases efficiency and reduces costs because you don't actually have to turn the turbines off because the drone can monitor and assess and take pictures of the turbines to be assessed offshore or onshore in the office. And it allows for monitoring and regular monitoring on a more regular basis, which also then leads to more preventative maintenance and which reduces downtime in the assets and unplanned outages, which all works towards the business element. So, and the other thing for us is success isn't just about Seagreen and about our project. Success for us is having a supply chain that supports Seagreen, but will also support our Berwick Bank, our Marbank, our Dogger Bank 2, our Dogger Bank 3, our Arklow facilities, and these projects, as well as the other developer facilities, where we are quite selfish. We do want everybody to be available for us, but to be in that place, then you need to have the support mechanism to support the whole of the offshore wind industry and not just SSE. I think the last slide, if that's all right. So potential suppliers, this is the kind of element where you can register on the SSE supplier registration base. Seagreen and its tier 1 contractors utilise the Open for Business portal, which is run by the Highlands and Islands Enterprise, but we also use, and so do our tier 1s, their own supplier registers. So again, I can't emphasise enough about ensuring that you are actually registered, you're really clear on what it is you provide and the capabilities, both within the SSE system, but also within our tier 1 suppliers, that you also check the Open for Business portal, because there are opportunities posted there. If we don't have your details, then we can't tell you. And even if we have your details, sometimes it slips through the net, so I apologise. But the Open for Business portals are a really good place to then look at opportunities, because we do actively encourage our supply chain to target those. And as I said at the start, we see the SSE portfolio presenting in excess of £25 billion worth of opportunity going forward. That's just the SSE portfolio. When you look at the industry as a whole, we think there's a huge opportunity for the construction and in the operation and maintenance, and for local UK and particularly Scottish suppliers to be involved in that. And I hope that helps. I think we're going to go into questions, and I'll return you back to kind of Lindsley and Gillian.
Thank you very much, John. I'll invite Gillian on just now as well. And gentlemen, if you could pop your camera on, there are lots of questions. John, you mentioned their Dogger Bank, so I just wanted to draw the attention of the audience to a series of Tier 1 webinars for the Dogger Bank development that are being organised by Energy Coast this week and next. So I'd encourage you to check in with those as well. They look terrific. Gillian, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. We've got some really good questions coming through, so thank you very much for your participation. The chat box is still open, so if there is anything that's coming to mind at the moment, feel free to still pop them in. John, I'm going to come to you first. There's a number of questions around SME engagement with tier 1s and the developers direct, and just some concerns about having initial meet the buyer and the opportunity to have that level of engagement. The next stages, there appears to be some challenges around follow-up. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice that you can offer to the companies should they come up against these barriers, where you've made that initial introduction, there's been a commitment to move to the next step, and then there's a barrier which SMEs are finding it difficult to get through?
Yeah, I think, and thanks, Gillian. I think the kind of key thing here is it is really difficult. So and I know and I understand the frustrations that suppliers face. If you put it into kind of context, Seagreen had meet the buyer events. That was to promote our tier 1s and get face-to-face contact and time with the tier 1 contractors. In going through that process, we had over 500 people that then registered and then met with our suppliers and the tier 1s. They haven't finalised, and our tier 1 suppliers then go through that. Our tier 1 suppliers haven't finalised the full supply chain yet. So although it sounds, or people think there's a barrier and haven't had any feedback, that might be in the first instance that because our tier 1s haven't actually finalised those elements. Bearing in mind, we only reached financial close on this project in June. We only signed all the contracts with our tier 1 suppliers in July, and going through a COVID period and trying to get everything in place, we recognise that our tier 1s are still in the process of finalising their contractual arrangements and coming back to SMEs and other entities. over and above that, I do get that it's difficult. The thing for us is to maintain that kind of visibility, to make sure that you have registered, to then ask questions and follow-ups, just to send in. Ourselves and our tier ones do not mind people coming and asking us questions and just asking how we're progressing. We will look to give, and so will our tier ones, programs or timeframes when we think we'll make decisions and what we're going to do. And that feedback then gives you a kind of view, but it is difficult to get back to every supplier and kind of take a view. But we do look, and we would encourage our tier ones to then give feedback on good, bad, or indifference, capabilities, any issues, so that people can improve. And I will take an action if anybody does have a specific issue, if they contact myself or through the SSE portal, then we'll address those and see if we can make it better, because it is about, we need the suppliers, we need that supply chain. Without them, we don't have projects. So anything we can do to try and make that better, we will, but it is difficult based upon the number of suppliers that we have and the process that we need to go through to try and get awards of contracts.
Okay, thanks, John, for that. Just looking at the portal landscape, if you like. Now, I think even on your slide, you referenced Open for Business and your own in-house supplier database. I'm wondering, can I get your thoughts around moving forward for the short, medium and longer term? We are aware that there appears to be a gap in terms of where you can advertise opportunities for developments throughout Scotland and indeed the UK. And from your own perspective, what do you see as a solution to this? We have, as we say, Open for Business, that's there already. That's focused on Scottish opportunities and bearing in mind the export potential as well. So do you have any thoughts about what a portal or a platform of that nature could look like in the future?
Yeah, I think, and it's a really interesting question. I think if you look back in history, SSE set up the Open for Business portal and actually put it in place and kind of drove that solution. And we're delighted that Highlands and Islands Enterprise have kind of taken it on and running with it, and over the moon that it's progressing and it's developing in the way that it has. It is a difficult kind of forum. The problem we always have is the engagement of the supply chain at different stages through the process, and getting all the levels of the supply chain involved, and how early do you involve in that process. These facilities, if we take Seagreen, where we are today, it's taken us 6 years to get to the point where we can actually start building it. Our Dogger Bank project, it's 6 years. Arklow, our project in Ireland, it's a 12-year period that we've been working on Arklow, and we're still not in a place yet we're able to get to kind of start building it. So it's difficult for us and the supply chain to understand and engage. I think it would be helpful if there was one central portal or platform where everybody in the industry utilised it, and so it became a kind of central pool so that all opportunities from all developers and all wind farms. But I think there's issues there with getting the industry aligned on what that looks like, how they'll use it, and what they look at, and how it'll be utilised. Different people within it have, and different people within the industries have different kind of priorities or different asks. Personally, I'd like to see a central kind of portfolio where you could, or platform where you could advertise all the opportunities, give everybody visibility, and also for developers to be open about kind of programs of work and future elements as much as they can be, bearing in mind that there's commercial confidentiality on how you bid in and what you do with things. But there isn't any harm in saying, look, we've got an offshore wind farm and our development kind of program is A, B, and C. So opportunities might be coming out in 5 months, 6 months, a year. Be aware of them, be ready for that, start engaging. So I'd like to see a central platform, but I think it's really difficult to get industry aligned, and that's something that we look at SOWIC to kind of lead on and try and get to a place where we get a consensus, and we'd be delighted to then utilise anything that's actually produced out the back of that.
Okay, thanks. Andrew?
I was just going to come in on that. I'm delighted to hear what John's saying there, because that's exactly the kind of thing that the SOWIC Innovation Group is trying to tackle head on. And as I mentioned in my slides, we're looking at the process. So a developer's got an idea for a project all the way through to, you know, when it's built, and as John's talked about, the value in operations and maintenance. At what point do the developers, the supply chain, and indeed the financiers and other stakeholders come together to talk about the ways forward for this? And then what can we reinvent to move some of that stuff to the left? Because I see in a lot of the chat, there's a lot of supply chain companies saying, how can I engage earlier. And
Yep.
John's explained there's quite a few difficulties. We're still working on the design. It's not ready time yet to be doing deeper engagement. But there's something intuitive about creating portals where an aggregated kind of demand statement could possibly be brought around. So I appreciate for those, you know, and I see the chat, the people looking at, you know, very direct. I need to engage right now with companies like John. So I can't help with those immediate issues, but I want to reassure the community that we are trying to look at, as these things continue on, how can we take out what I might just call the inefficiencies and the things that don't work quite as well as we would all like. And I think John's onto something there to say there are ways of improving things, and that's what we need to be putting our shoulders to try and improve, because we want to see the people on the chat rooms here succeed ultimately, you know.
Gillian, can I add to that? I mean, I think you know, ultimately that would be great to have that all laid out and supportive of work with anyone who wants to look at that. In the shorter term, one of the things to consider is that, you know, from a perspective, a bidder point of view, you want to make sure that you've got an offer that is different and better from the competition. And one of the things that the Growth Partnership is trying to do is to help companies to improve so that they've got a more competitive offer. So, for example, the Wind Expert Support Toolkit, that could provide consultancy support to help you to build up the evidence to show and to make you stand out above the crowd, so that when you are then engaging with developers or with the tier ones, that you've got an offer that's above what other people are offering. So there are ways that you can look at what you can do, and we'd be interested in how we can support that. And then the West programme would be one way that we could do that.
Okay, thanks. Andy, while you're on, one for you, which is an interesting one actually, and it's about the companies that benefit from the support through OWGP, and essentially does that then work back to being, if you're a company within Scotland, that's classed as local content for that developer, which is an interesting question, and I hadn't thought about it before either.
So the two things are slightly separate. So the funding for OWGP comes from the OIC members. So that's one set of funding that comes in. There's no direct link between that and how local content is calculated, which is a calculation that each company will do based on working through the different contracts that it has. So there's no direct connection there. OWGP is neutral in terms of where the benefit is across the country. Having said that, we're very supportive of what the clusters are doing and what the development agencies are doing around the clusters. So we see benefits in working in and around those clusters, but there's not a direct tie between that and the funding coming in from the OIC members.
Okay, thanks, Andy. There are an awful lot of very specific questions, John, which you'll be seeing on the chat about suppliers and contractors. So I think what we said before is contact details at the end, and I think on your own slide it had the Seagreen email address there. So I think that'll be helpful, and I think we can put that on the follow-up email as well, just to make sure that gets out to everybody who needs it. There was another question here I was wanting to just do quickly before we have to finish, and it was around community benefit, John, from Seagreen, and the opportunity for charities and companies to be able to apply for that.
Yep. So we run quite a successful, well, we think it's quite a successful community benefit kind of program across our renewables fleet. I think last year or in the last month we confirmed that we'd contributed £6 million in the last financial year to local communities, and as part of the COVID, we accelerated £1 million of that to help communities that were struggling with COVID, helping with anything that then assisted them or tried to make the COVID thing less of an impact for them. From an element going forward, these funds are available. There are mechanisms, and it's actually on the SSE website again. But if you go to the SSE Seagreen info, we'll reply to those things. But if you go onto the SSE Renewables website, it actually gives you details of the community funds, how you apply, and they go in front of a board, and that board isn't run by SSE. It's actually done in conjunction with the communities. and the communities actually decide how the funding gets distributed. SSE sits on it, but it's a community decision that's based upon, so people kind of put forward, here's a proposal, this is what it looks like, here's the benefits to the community, this is how much money we'd like for it, and then the community makes a decision on that. And we then sit in amongst it and we administer it accordingly. So there are opportunities, people can register, and we would encourage people and local communities to do that where they think that they can add benefit.
That's excellent. Thanks very much for that, John. Unfortunately, we are at time now, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank you all very much for your time here today, both our presenters and all our attendees.